The secret, mostly hidden from the public agenda of the ACLU is communism. That's what they're going after, okay? And the whole concept of this is it starts with evolution. That's the philosophy. This leads to atheism. They think, well, if these things can happen naturalistically with no God, then there is no God. And this quickly leads into humanism. Well, if there is no God, then man must be God, and we have to decide what's right and wrong for man, because man's swirling down into destruction. This quickly leads to democracy, because how do we decide right and wrong? Who gets to decide who is in power of who? This becomes the majority, might make right, that circular reasoning argument. We don't have time to talk about it tonight. We can discuss it later if you want. But, this might make right. Well, whoever has the most people, the bigger might, they're the ones that win. Okay? And this quickly leads to socialism, because as you get this 50-50 point, it only takes that one person to change the sway of the vote. Okay? Whoever's in charge gets to change the sway of the vote. And socialism, if you have these 50-50 arguments and people arguing, they need a referee, somebody to, quell the arguments. And that's the people that are going to take control of this thing, and they certainly will sell them, their referee positions. Okay? This slowly turns into nationalism, where if you get control of enough things, now you have an entire society focused on the nation instead. And this takes nationalism is very short-lived, very short-lived. It goes straight into communism right after that, and it all stems from evolution. That's the source. So my whole goal is to cut this off at the source, fight the root of the problem. Again, the philosophy of the classroom in one generation becomes the philosophy of government in the next. This is out of Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. This book, it says, the German schools from the first grade through the universities were quickly Nazified. Textbooks were hastily rewritten. Curricula were changed. Mein Kampf was made, our infallible pedagogical guiding star, and the teachers who failed to see the new light were cast out. There's a whole long story we could talk about teachers in this country who have come out about creation in the public schools have lost their jobs, and universities have lost their jobs for doing this. And this is exactly no different than the Third Reich. When anybody who failed to see the guiding star of Nazism, they were kicked out of the schools. Most instructors had been more or less Nazi in sentiment when not outright party members to strengthen their ideology, and they were dispatched to special schools for intensive training in nationalist socialist principles, emphasis being put on Hitler's racial doctrines. Hitler stressed and singled out the idea of biological evolution as the most forceful weapon against traditional religion. He hated traditional religion, okay? The American Atheist magazine says, Christianity has fought and still fights and will fight science to the desperate end over evolution, because evolution destroys utterly and finally the very reason Jesus' life on earth was supposedly made necessary. Destroy Adam and Eve and the original sin, and in the rubble you will find the sorry remains of the Son of God. If Jesus was not the Redeemer who died for our sins, and this is what evolution means, then Christianity is nothing. And Hitler himself said, I regard Christianity as the most fatal, seductive lie that ever existed. He hated Christianity, okay? And he also hid behind the cloak of the Catholic Church. These are some of the newspaper clippings that they would have, the photographs they would take to make him look good of him coming out of the Catholic Church with a cross over his head. The one on the left is when they're fixing an altar into a Nazi altar where you could get baptized into Nazism, okay? Made into a complete religion. And, look good for the papers, shaking hands with the Pope. This is the Catholic Church in Nazi Germany by Gunter Louis. He said, a joint pastoral letter from all the German bishops was read from the pulpits January 3rd, 1937, stating that the German bishops consider it their duty to support the head of the German Reich by all those means which the Church has at its disposal. We must mobilize all the spiritual and moral forces of the Church in order to strengthen confidence in the Führer. And keep in mind, Jesus Christ said, and I forgot to add this in here, he says, my kingdom is not of this world. And the problem is that the Catholic Church has been in bed, fornication with the kings of the earth, spiritual fornication, and that's been one of the biggest problems in their religion. This concordant between Hitler and the Vatican, signed in 1933, says before bishops take the possession of their dioceses, they are to take an oath of fealty either to the Reich representative of the state concerned or to the president of the Reich, according to the following formula. It said, before God and on the Holy Gospels I swear and promise, as becomes a bishop, loyalty to the German Reich and to the state of. I swear and promise to honor the legally constituted government and to cause the clergy of my diocese to honor it. In the performance of my spiritual office and in my solicitude, For the welfare and the interests of the German Reich, I will endeavor to avoid all detrimental acts which might endanger it. And the Church's magisterium, and this is from Pope John Paul II, a letter to the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, October 22nd, 1996. Church's magisterium is directly concerned with the question of evolution, for it involves the conception of man. In 1996, the Pope officially accepted that evolution was okay with the Church's doctrine, okay? And they say, with this step, you point the way to solutions which will be beneficial to the whole human community. He's telling the scientists this, the evolutionists this. These are solutions beneficial to the whole human community. Hitler's hit list said, or basically this is from, I had to document this one very carefully because, you know, the evolutionists go nuts when you show them this kind of thing. It shows the species, what they would call the species. He says the Nordics were close to pure Aryan in their blood, this Aryan, this higher race, okay? Germanics were predominantly Aryan, Mediterraneans were slightly Aryan, Slavics were half Aryan, half ape, Orientals were slightly ape, the black Africans were predominantly ape, and Jews, because of, he says they have a fiendish-shaped skull, were close to pure ape. Well, when he was done killing off the Jews, who was he going to go after next? Hitler hated the black people. And this, Sir Arthur Keith even said the German Führer has consistently sought to make the practice of Germany conform to the theory of evolution. Okay? Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf, he says, no more than nature desires the mating of the weaker with stronger individuals, even less does she desire the blending of a higher with a lower race, the mingling of Aryan blood with that of lower peoples. His whole philosophy was bent in evolution. If you read Mein Kampf, you'll see it come out in that. Does anybody here know where the Olympics were held in 1936? Berlin. Berlin, right? Who won the most gold medals?
The black guy.
Jesse Owens, the black American athlete, okay? If you see right there, the guy that's, you know, has the Hitler, his hand up right there, that was actually, he was supposed to be their German, you know, super-bred athlete. And he was the first person to go up and shake Jesse Owens' hand and congratulate him. Not everybody in Germany was a bad guy. But there were some really, people just duped into thinking that Hitler was actually an honest guy and was doing the right thing for the world because they were convinced that evolution was true. And here he said, he's quoted in Owens, was quoted here in ESPN. He says, I wasn't invited to shake hands with Hitler, but I wasn't invited to the White House to shake hands with the president either. It was going on in more than one country. And Hitler offered to send the Jews on to any country that would take them. He says, I'll send them on luxury ships if you'll take them. Roosevelt refused to take the Jews, and they were slaughtered in the concentration camps. This German philosopher said, if Hitler believed in anything at all, then it was in the laws of evolution which justified and sanctified his actions, and especially his cruelties. A direct line runs from Darwin through the father of the eugenics movement, Darwin's cousin, Francis Galton, who we didn't have time to talk about, but to the extermination camps of Nazi Europe. Okay? Dr. Leo Alexander, he was a Jewish survivor of the Holocaust. He said there is a difference between those who look upon their fellow human beings as common creatures of a common creator and those who look upon them as conglomerate of biologicals and chemicals. This is the result you get from the philosophy of evolution. This is, there can be no other justification for this. In 1936, the German Supreme Court refused to recognize Jews living in Germany as persons in the legal sense. Well, how interesting, because in 1973, the same the U.S. Supreme Court declared the word person as used in the 14th Amendment does not include the unborn. It's interesting, I didn't bring the quotes with me tonight, but Margaret Sanger said that a child is a parasite in the woman's body, no different than what Hitler said when he said that the Jews are a parasite in the body of nations. Very similar, okay? What you believe determines how you behave. And that's why I do what I do. This is why I fight against this stuff. It's not just a dumb theory, it's a dangerous religion. This is just a pile of the shoes. That's just the shoes, a small portion of the shoes that they took off of all the people that they slaughtered in these concentration camps. Okay? The death was just untold.